Hmm.
Anybody, has anybody thought about how it feels
Who's talking? I
to
can't.
go through life?
Who's
Oh,
talking?
Judy, Judy.
Okay, Judy. Yeah, thank you, Judy. Please jump in.
Yeah. Has anybody thought about? I'm assuming now that most of us think we have at least enough. Maybe not, because enough means different things to different people. But have you thought about how people feel who never have enough? They can never have enough in their lifetime, and it's they don't have contentment. I don't. I think there's an unrest there always, because you never have enough. You're never content. So if you
Yeah.
look at it from that standpoint, and somebody made this remark a few years ago, and I remember the man uh, talking to somebody who would never have enough, and he pointed out to the man, and he says, "I'm happy I have enough, something that you'll probably never have." So just another thought about enough and not having enough ever
Hmm. Yeah.
beyond what you would normally need.
Thank you, Judy.
I think that goes hand in hand with power. I think there's a lot of people who want to acquire power, and once they have a little bit, it's never enough. And with that goes the whole material part of it. There's just never enough. You see that in politicians all the time.
So Lee is reminding us that enough is not just about material resources, it's about non-material resources too. So it might be about power. Or do we know people, and maybe even sometimes ourselves, that maybe we don't have enough security, that we don't feel secure enough, or maybe that we're not liked enough. And so how many kind of dangerous behaviors, right, come with not enough, that we don't think we have enough control, we don't have enough power, we don't have enough security, we don't have enough love. Now it might be true or it might be perceived, right? But how many maladies, how many psychological maladies come from this idea of not enough in terms of non-material stuff? It's not just the material resources, it's the non-material things too. Lee, I really
You just described the Enneagram.
so I appreciate you raising that for us. And by the way, that describes religion. It describes religion too. But Ron, yeah, we need to maybe look into the Enneagram more. What is this? Let me raise another thing that he said. He said a lot of his writing, when it hasn't been in defense of precious things, it's been giving of thanks to precious things. Talk about that which is precious. I don't know how else to say that. I mean, what could you keep stripping away from you, even if it'd be difficult? I'm assuming it would be family relationships, etc. But the precious things in your life.
I think we're trained not to think about the precious things. Like he said, how did he write it? The danger of every precious thing now shows us how precious everything is. And that we're kind of trained to not look for precious until we see it because it's gone.
Well, Tony, you're very prophetic there, because isn't that exactly what he's saying when he quotes from William Butler Yeats, right? Things reveal themselves
In the passing away.
Passing away. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I mean, doesn't your heart sink? How many people have passed away and you wish you would have said one more thing to them? How many things have passed away? How many relationships have been broken? How many, right? I mean, how many memories have been lost? And you would have been, should have been, could have been, right? Might have been. Isn't that things reveal themselves passing away? Don't you? I wanted to cry.
So how do we work on, I mean, that to me is the crux of the whole problem, is because we need to define enough, and we need to teach the world to appreciate the precious now, not when it's gone. I don't know how I mean, you know, Janet, you mentioned the pandemic, and I mean, who would have thought that our insecurity in the way we go about our life would make toilet paper precious? And, you know, it just, I don't know, how do we teach the world to love and appreciate what's precious right now? I don't.
Well, and Tony, I think that's a wonderful question. The bigger question for Michael Spath is, how do I remind myself? How do I remind myself what is most precious? And then slowly, like a pebble in the water, you know, slowly it starts moving outward into those around me, and then further beyond that. That's my bigger question about becoming aware on a day-by-day basis what's most precious, not the things you know, you can tell what's most precious in your life by where your feet take you, where your energy is spent, and the lines in your checkbook or on your credit card statement. And I'm afraid to be evaluated by any of you on those three, you know, on those three, using those three criteria, because too often the things that I think are most precious to me are not what's most precious to me in real life. And so your question, Tony, while important, really points a finger at Michael, because it challenges me to really evaluate what's most precious to me, really.
Doesn't it kind of point to all of us? I mean, and I guess it's real easy for us to look at this with a more mature aspect, because like in moving to Utah, I got rid of a lot of things that I thought were precious to me. And I still get here to Utah and I'm looking at a lot of stuff and going, I don't know why I even brought this with me, you know? And that's just things. And what's precious to me is, and you know, this sounds horrible, but I keep saying, thank God for COVID, because it made everybody Zoom. And now I'm with what's really precious to me, the people that make me think, the people that make me stretch and improve myself. So.
Thank you, Tony.
I just had to run away because we had a red-breasted grosbeak come to our feeder, and I've gotten my grandkids so excited about the preciousness of some of the birds, even though we may kill a robin. We bought a BB gun that's been attacking our window, but that's another horrible story. But
you just
anyway,
the point you're trying to make, Jane. I just want you to know that.
I know. I was like,
the goddamn robin is not real precious, but go ahead.
But their excitement was pretty much equal to mine. And it was, it's a bird. But it's not. It's a precious bird and special. And they all got really excited. We got our bird book out, and little things of nature right now, I'm so much more aware of than, I've always loved our beautiful view and everything, but every little aspect of it, I get to make precious. And then through the eyes of children, that's been pretty amazing.
Michael?
Yeah, Jan.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jan.
Parker Palmer recently did a webinar last week, and he quoted Wendell Berry about big solutions. Big solutions do not call for, or big problems don't call for big solutions. They call for a million little solutions. And in this interview today, which you played, which is a little dated, I suppose. I don't know, when was this interview, Michael?
5 years ago, I think.
5 years ago. Same issues. He's addressing hope, and I think the youth, and I know Wendell Berry spends a lot of time thinking about his children, his grandchildren, and the lives they're going to have, and the generation after that, because that's what mindful stewardship is about, is thinking about, well, it's thinking about downstream. But he said you can't impose answers. He said to look at what you need. We've been discussing what is precious, and maybe precious in need that is an expansion of one, but what do you need? Taking inventory. In this pandemic, isn't that where we find ourselves, really looking at our basic needs? And just to put, I know we're closing in on time, but with the Hawkins family farm, there aren't a lot of farmers that are doing farming like this. And in Indiana, less and less farming is on the small scale. And we're seeing great disruption right now in distribution of big ag. This is a great opportunity to really look and establish a relationship with a local farmer. And there are several, Seven Sons, and the HawkinsFamilyFarm.com. I'm just gonna say it. Check it out, because to be sustainable with this type of farming, it's not easy. It's gonna take a community. And I think that's what we're talking about here. That's what's precious to all of us, is our community. And you can define it in people, and you can define it with your the source of our food. That whole interdependence.
Janet, I think of
Thank you, Jan.
the documentary Biggest Little Farm. If you haven't seen it, you want to look that up, but that he's doing some of the same kinds of things. And I read a book about nutrition that was on a totally different subject, but had one little chapter about modern farming practices and monoculture, factory farming, and the effects on topsoil. And topsoil is not a very sexy subject, but in fact, I think we, at some point when they do an autopsy of what we have done to the planet, one of the biggest destructive things we will have done is we will have just decimated where all of life comes from, that top foot or 1 to 3 feet of living soil that has more species in a cubic inch than there are on the whole planet. You know, it's just amazing. well, I guess that wouldn't make any sense, but there's just packed with life that we are just decimating and killing. And it's the life, it is as much the life sustaining as any other aspect. And we in so small ways, like the Hawkins farm, they're trying to create healthy topsoil where it's been stripped away, but it's really very difficult, and it's a very slow process. And the real challenge, I think, is how 7 billion people fit on this planet without being so destructive to that. And we'll find that the topsoil is one of the big things we blew on our test of how we treated the planet.
Thank you, Phil.
There were, if I can interject, they gave the statistic that there were 7 million family farms in 1934. And just to try to give a perspective on this, a family could be self-sustaining on about 100 acres or 140 acres, something like that, and they needed that many. Well, now we're approaching, if we don't have already, 3 times that population. And I'm not sure, or I'm not convinced that we can return to enough agriculture. The reason that our population has been the size it is now is because of technological advances, and for good or ill, that's a result of industrialization and capitalism. And I'm certainly recognizing what Wendell Berry says, and the theme today seems to be to have enough and not to make a killing. But that brings me to capitalism. Unfettered is the problem. And that we have to think, and you've heard me say this theme again and again, is that it controlled, it should be a political economy, and it's up to us politically to take care of these ills that we've been talking about today. And I think Todd is probably sitting next to Janet here. He talks about Pinker all the time. And are we better off? I've had the experience of being on a small self-sustaining farm in my early childhood, and I could see part of that lifestyle and why so much land was needed, to sustain so many people. But right now we're in a situation, we got millions of people in city areas. I don't think they can be sustained by natural farming, and we've gotten into this, and those are some of the ills. But these are just observations of the problem. But I would think that it's up to us. I try to think more pragmatically, I guess, and to solve problems. And I think our bit that we can do is more political than. And like I say, I love Wendell Berry. I understand. I mean, I can visualize what he's talking about because I was there. But I think that whole era has played a dirty trick on us. It's ceased to exist, and we have to deal with the problems as such. So, just some thoughts.
Thanks, Quentin.
Can I add just a comment before we go?
Sure.
I think so much of this is tied up with what I consider one of my biggest concerns, because this government, this administration is quietly, slowly behind people's backs, including during this pandemic, loosening controls that we have put in place to protect our environment. I don't think many people are real aware of the bills and the presidential, what do I want to call it? His mandates that are going out, loosening the restrictions on air pollution, on our rivers, and giving that industrial body of people more than enough and their profit. And it makes me so angry because our oversight of it is being neglected at this point because of the other big political things that are going on in
Yeah.
the world. And I think there's a lot of intention on those big industries and Trump and doing this stuff when people aren't paying attention. We've got to pay attention to what's happening.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. And you can see the worst example of it now when we take away these controls. You know, we have to
Right.
get, and only government can do this. The only government is large enough to do it, but we have to have the correct government in there to do it and solve these problems. I'm just convinced, thank you for that. That says it even better than I was trying to say it.
Thanks. Eugene wanted to get in, then I'm gonna have a word to close. And since I'm aware of the time, thank you, Quentin. Thank you, Lee. Eugene, you wanted to say something?
Yes, I don't know if anyone saw a documentary, I believe it was on PBS, where they're doing a farm movement in Detroit. Within the city limits of Detroit, there's a gentleman who, it was a very interesting documentary, but he was a man of means who was buying up land within the city of Detroit with the intent of doing farming. It's really worth seeing because you get the what people had to say about it, who are going to be immediately and impacted, and what he had to say, and people he was working with. It's going to be something worthwhile watching as time goes on.
Thanks, Eugene. You know, I took a field trip with 4 or 5 students about 6 years ago to Detroit in my religion and culture class for an assignment, an extra credit assignment that they were doing. The city of Detroit has allowed individuals to buy for very, very inexpensively whole city blocks and to farm within the city. And so one individual lived in a, what would you call it? Like a tractor trailer bed, you know, whatever the dimensions, like 8 feet by 30 feet or whatever it was, made that into a home and was living on a city block that he had begun farming. There are also a number of places that had city farms like in half blocks, and there are food distribution centers and food deserts. And we did a whole unit in our religion and culture class on religion and food and the culture of food. And Detroit was sort of their case study. And that's I'm glad that you pointed that out to us, because that's an effort by the Detroit city government to highlight the issue of food in their community. Well, I'm aware of the time we're going over. You know, the one aspect of this that we didn't get to, and if I was preaching a sermon or giving a talk on Wendell Berry, it would have been my entree into his thought, and that is the idea of contrariness, or Wendell Berry as the mad farmer. Mad in both ways, to take the word mad. And I'm just wondering, and I know we don't have time for this, but the question I would ask you to ponder in this next week as we are still quarantining is, what is your witness of contrariness? Or how are you witnessing what I would call holy madness in the life you're living, in the way you're consuming, in the way that you're spending time and energy and money? How are you giving witness to your own faithful contrariness and holy madness in your life? That would have been my entree into conversing about Wendell Berry. Hey, everybody, thank you for today. I'm glad that you found this to be inspiring for you. And well, I'll be seeing some of you soon. I should give one last announcement, and that is this coming Thursday at 2 o'clock. Terry and Ron and I and all of it, and Pam and Linda Kerr and all of us at Indiana Center for Middle East Peace are excited about our interview this coming Thursday at 2:00 with Steve Sosebee. Steve is the founder and president and CEO of the Palestine Children's Relief Fund. It's based in Ohio, but they provide humanitarian relief and free medical care to children in the West Bank and throughout Palestine and Israel and throughout the Middle East. Steve was married to a Palestinian social worker, a woman who died of cancer back 30 years ago. And he decided that he, in her honor, would build a cancer center in Beit Jala, which is just right outside Bethlehem, at one of the hospitals there. And he raised money to do that, and it's grown and grown, and they bring children to the US and their families for medical care that can't happen in that region. And they're building now a cancer center and clinic in Gaza. And there are a number of places throughout the Middle East where they're doing this wonderful, wonderful work. So join us for an hour and 15 minutes on Thursday at 2:00. I've sent out the Zoom link. I'll be doing that again. I did it again yesterday. I'll be doing it again tomorrow. So join us, would you please, at 2:00 Thursday afternoon with my interview with Steve Sosebee. Thanks, everyone. Peace and have a good week.
Thanks, Michael.